Hi, I'm Ben Jones, and you've found Theology Over Easy. So this year, our goal is to bring a new episode to you every Monday. We'll look at different theological topics, each one spanning several weeks. So perhaps the best place to start is at the beginning. The creation stories, and there are two stories, by the way, in Genesis chapters 1 through 3, they continue to generate controversy. Folks who treat the Bible as the words of God rather than the Word of God seem to think that the authority of the Bible is at stake if the whole of it isn't taken literally. Now, the authority of the Bible and what that means is a topic for a future episode. For now, what's important for anyone studying the Bible is you got to start with the right questions. And before you jump to the question of what a passage means to you or to us, we should ask, what did the ancient people to whom this was written think about it? And regarding Genesis, how did the Judaism of Jesus' day understand, say, the story of Adam and Eve? I mean, here we have Adam and Eve who are placed within a wonderful garden. They're given commands and responsibilities, but they blow it and are kicked out. Any Jew reading that story would have immediately recognized it as a story about them. I mean, follow this. God creates the world in Adam and Eve. God calls the Hebrew people to be his chosen people. God places Adam and Eve in a wonderful garden. God gives Israel the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. God gives Adam and Eve commands. God gives Israel the law. And God makes Adam and Eve in his image, which means in part they're given responsibilities to reflect God's love out into the world and the glory and praise of creation back to God. So God gave Israel important responsibilities too. One of them was to be a light to the nations. Adam and Eve blow it and are banished from the garden. Israel blows it too, and they are sent into exile. So I think it is clear, right? The Adam and Eve story is the story of Israel. And the question hanging in the air at the end of those stories in Genesis is, how will God set things right? But that same question hung in the air in the Second Temple Judaism of Jesus' day. I mean, the Babylonian exile had ended 500 years before Jesus' birth. And so even though the Jews were back in the land that God had given them, back in the garden, if you will, with the exception of some brief periods of time, they had been ruled by one pagan nation after another. Things were not right. God's people were forced to live with paganism in their very midst. In the book of Genesis, God's solution emerges in the call of Abraham. Somehow, through his offspring, God plans to set things right. But that brings us full circle. God, or I should say Israel, called to be the means of God's solution to the fall, they discover that they too are part of the problem. In the larger story of Israel, the prophets say that God will set things right by sending a representative, a Messiah. That's the narrative we have to have in the back of our minds when we read the New Testament. Otherwise, there are all sorts of things in the Gospels, in Acts, in Paul, and the rest that we will never understand. Getting stuck on the number of days or how young the earth is misses the point. But if we let them speak to us the way they were intended, we may discover in them, just as Israel did, our stories as well. I'll see you next time on Theology Over Easy.